Hey guys, Judd from Diabetes Smarts here. So, I didn't really have a desire to talk about the ever topical coronavirus, but it seems sort of inevitable at this moment. We probably should be talking about it, especially for this channel because of a couple of reasons. We'll get into that in a second. But yes, just to let you know, this is going to be our official coronavirus and diabetes discussion. So, if you have diabetes and you're concerned about what to do when it comes to this specific virus, we'll try to give you some important information coming up. Okay, so originally we were planning on some different vids for this week, but I think considering the general atmosphere right now of worry and some misinformation that may be working its way through that old interweb there, I think it's probably important right now just to give some hopefully useful information regarding this virus and specifically how it may affect you if you have diabetes or even prediabetes. We're talking type 1 and type 2 and prediabetes. So first of all, I think it's important to understand exactly what this coronavirus is. It is a virus, and plenty of people get viruses each year. Usually, they're not of too much concern. Most time, you get the flu or a virus, you can kind of just lay in bed, work your way through it, and you'll be okay. But this one is different, and why is that exactly? Well, this particular virus causes what they are referring to as COVID-19. I'm not going to try to figure out what that stands for, but what I do know is it is a respiratory illness. So now COVID-19 is what people are worried about because symptoms can include those lung issues you've been hearing about, like coughing, shortness of breath. Some cases can become bad enough that they may require someone to be put on a ventilator. And so this illness itself, which as of now seems to hit elderly people with previous respiratory problems the hardest, and I'm sure you've heard by now that they are saying about 20% of that specific population may be at risk for death. But that's 20% of a small percentage of the general population. So altogether, they're saying that a bad to worst case scenario wise, about 2 to 3% of all people who contract the coronavirus will die as a result of COVID-19. Now, it was reported that for the earliest known COVID-19 cases in China, of the people with diabetes who also contracted this virus, about 7% of people have died so far. That is a pretty high figure when you think about it, but it's really difficult right now to take that bit of data and apply it to what might happen across the world. Now, a few years ago, if you remember, we had another pandemic known as swine flu. What the deal was with swine flu was it hit in 2009, and this flu swept through America and the world, but it seemed to attack younger people. It's my generation, actually, were hit the hardest. And overall, the reported numbers showed that somewhere between 10 and 20% of the world population contracted the swine flu virus known as H1N1, and that was about 1 billion people they estimated. And of those 1 billion people, there were somewhere in the neighborhood of 500,000 deaths. It's a little hard to tell, but that's about the number they think perished because of the swine flu. At the end of the day, the swine flu had a mortality rate of about 0.02%, which is much lower than the presumptive death rate we may experience with COVID-19. And importantly, swine flu was much harder to contract, meaning that the coronavirus is much more easily transmittable. And that is one of the main factors going into this sudden surge of worry and things closing all over the country, is because it's going to be a lot easier to get sick from this virus, to get the virus, than you might have had a chance of contracting the swine flu from about 10 years back. Now, that means that there is a real possibility that far more people are going to get this virus than the swine flu. So if you just go by numbers, the 2% of those who contract the virus that might die could translate into millions of deaths. This number could be very, very high. And also another issue with the sheer number of people possibly getting this virus is how hospitals are going to manage the situation. And just because this particular virus seems to be affecting older people with respiratory problems the most, and because these sorts of classifications have some intersection with a large segment of the diabetic population, this specific virus may end up affecting a large number of people with type 2 diabetes, even possibly type 1 diabetes. And I think this is really where the real worry is coming from, the sheer possible number of those who will require medical attention within just the next few weeks alone. There are concrete steps hospitals can take if you are really bad, if you contract the coronavirus and you're having real respiratory problems. But the problem where the death rates might rise is going to come down to possibly just hospitals simply not having the resources to help the sheer number of people that might come in from this. So they might run out of beds, they might run out of ventilators, other equipment, which can save lives. But once they run out of these resources, what's going to happen? That's the big worry here. So there is a real fear right now and a real danger here of simply not having the resources required to heal the amount of people that are going to come down with this disease. So in general, to me, this means a few things for anybody, not just anyone worried about diabetes. Obviously, first of all, I think number one priority for everybody here is to minimize your exposure to this disease. Minimize your risk of simply contracting the coronavirus. So even if you are young and healthy and you know the chances of you yourself not dying, being very low for this virus, you should be aware that every new person who becomes infected with this means another path for that virus to propagate. So you don't just want to minimize your risk for contracting this virus. You want to make sure that you are not exposing other people to it as well. So keeping yourself away from work or school or just all that fun stuff out in town, right now for the benefit of your health and the benefit for everyone else's health, I think everyone is the consensus is self-isolation as best as you can right now. Also, of course, wash your hands multiple times throughout the day. You probably know this. You've heard it a million times by now, but of course it's true. Especially if you are going out in public and you are touching doorknobs or countertops or anything else, you're exchanging money, you're going to be touching a lot of things that other people have touched. So, that washing your hands frequently and not touching your face are probably more important than trying to find a face mask. So really do the best you can to keep these things in your head. Work very, very hard to not touch your face. I know it's very difficult for a lot of people because we all subconsciously touch our face many times per hour, maybe many times even per minute without even realizing it. So it's not just about isolation. It's about cleanliness, washing your hands for about 20 seconds or more at a time, possibly even using paper towels to dry your hands as opposed to other towels that other people might be using. As much as we want to cut down on not using paper products for the sake of the environment, now might be an okay time to be using disposable paper towels to dry your hands. And in terms of isolation, of course, it may also mean, sadly, isolating yourselves from your loved ones a little bit. It's not happy to think about, but, some couples might have to consider not sleeping in the same bed for a while, not being intimate for a little while, especially if one of those two people might be having to go out a lot into town for work or what have you. If someone's exposing themselves to this virus a lot and you're coming in contact with that person, you want to minimize those close encounters. So some social distancing is going to be in order for everyone here. Secondly, I think it's important for everybody, diabetes or no, to understand when you truly need to consider going to the hospital. Many people, they get one little hiccup or cough and they want to rush into the ER and take every test under the sun. And I totally get that because, you know what, I'm a bit of a hypochondriac myself. I get that urge. But again, that's just going to add to the infection risk for you and for others by going out to a hospital unnecessarily. So you need to really know the symptoms and when it's actually time to get up and go to the hospital and when it's time to not, basically. So the symptoms of COVID-19, I kind of mentioned it before, but you're looking at respiratory issues, possibly a persistent cough, shortness of breath, trouble breathing, and maybe you might get a fever. Most people, it'll be like any typical flu. They might get a fever, they might have some coughing, but it's going to go away. They should be fine. It's that 2% of the population that we're worried about here. So what health officials are saying is if you have any of these symptoms, especially trouble breathing or shortness of breath, first thing you should do is not rush to the ER. It's call your doctor. They're going to go through your list of symptoms with you, and they're going to help you figure out if it is time to go into the emergency room or if it's time just to come to them. So those are the symptoms. Let's get into some specifics about what this virus has to do with diabetes now. The big thing here, the group who seems to be most at risk, as I've mentioned, may also coincide with a lot of people who happen to have type 2 diabetes. So if you are a bit older, let's say 65, 70 or older, if you have some blood sugar control issues, your immune system will have been weakened, and that could raise your risk for contracting this virus. So key number one for diabetics right now, especially those over 70, is to take those steps to not only minimize your exposure risk, but to also just control your blood glucose levels. Because the more out of balance they are, the more you may raise your risk for contracting the coronavirus. But look, from the reporting so far, this does not mean having type 1 or type 2 diabetes makes you more at risk of dying or other serious complications from this disease. So far, the experts are just saying you may be at a higher risk just for contracting this virus if you are diabetic. So don't forget too much that if you have type 2 diabetes, that suddenly you feel like you might be at serious risk of dying from this. Just means that you may be at more of a risk of contracting this virus in the first place. So again, first things first, balance your blood sugar levels as best as you can. Now, of course, it's always important to monitor your blood glucose levels, but right now this seems to be even more important, not just for your long-term health, but also now for your short-term health. So that means trying to get on a regimented eating schedule and doing consistent checks of your blood sugar levels. Monitor your levels throughout the day. Most health officials are saying at least every 4 hours. That is what medical experts are recommending right now for diabetics related to worrying about coronavirus. Try to monitor your ketones as well. High levels of ketones can lead to diabetic ketoacidosis, and high ketone levels can happen when blood sugar levels are running on high. So stay away from those sugary treats, especially for the next couple weeks, and make sure you're eating lots of fiber-rich foods. On top of that, pair, as we say a lot, pair your foods that might raise your sugar levels with some amount of protein to help stabilize those blood sugar levels. Now, when it comes to stocking up, forget stocking up on toilet paper. This is not a hurricane. No one is going to be running out of toiletries. But stock up on those high fiber food products that might become more difficult to find coming up. So you want to stock up on broccoli or kale or spinach. Get lots of veggies, especially ones that you can freeze. get those home, freeze them if you can, and make sure to get them onto your plate for every meal now. And just because you may be on lockdown and sitting on your couch more than usual, this does not mean it is time to break out all those bags of chips you've got saved up. Stow that stuff away. Forget about it. This is the time to cut even more down on those processed foods and especially those processed high sugar foods. Now, as for getting your healthy groceries, if you can, you may want to consider a delivery service if your local supermarket offers that, and if you can afford to do it that way. And that way you won't have to go out. You're not going to have to add to your risk of exposure or risk of putting other people, in the path of this virus. So, possibly try a delivery service. If a delivery guy comes and drops something off, make sure to wipe down the boxes with some sanitizer, and make sure to wash your hands after coming into contact with a delivery person. But otherwise, this should be possibly a slightly healthier way to obtain your groceries, as opposed to going out into the store to get them. Now, a lot of medical experts are reminding people to, without adding to their exposure risk, to get the latest flu vaccine. Now, maybe you've had it already, that's great, but flu shots can not only lower your chances of getting the flu, they can help you lower the bad symptoms of a flu if you do end up getting it anyway. So you certainly don't want to have the flu and then get this coronavirus. But a less severe case of the flu will certainly help you if you were to also contract coronavirus. So that is why getting a flu shot is important. But speaking of shots and medications, all that stuff, if you are taking any medications for diabetes, medical experts are saying continue your normal medical regime. Don't freak out here with that kind of stuff. If you can manage to stay on your medications, if going out to the doctor to get new prescriptions isn't that difficult, just stick to your schedule. But when it comes to those cough and cold medicines, you need to know that many of these are made from syrups, and they're going to contain some amount of sugar. So if you are going to take a cough syrup, just remember it is a syrup. It could actually end up skyrocketing your blood sugar. So pills tend to be a lower sugar alternative to those cough syrups. You just want to take a look at them specifically and make sure they're not loaded with added sugar, because a lot of pills as well do contain some amount of sugar. But some drugs, like even some decongestants, even in pill form, I believe, they can also raise your blood sugar. So just be aware of that as well. Maybe ask the pharmacist which medications might lower your blood sugar and which ones might raise them, because on the flip side, there are other drugs like some pain and fever reducing medications like aspirin, which can actually lower your glucose levels. So you need to be a little aware of which medications are going to affect your blood sugar one way or the other. Specifically, another drug that is going to possibly give you some issues would be ibuprofen. I have been told you should be careful with using ibuprofen right now. It may actually react in a negative way with insulin. It may create some actually adverse hypoglycemic effects. So just be aware of that as well if you're taking ibuprofen. Now, on top of maintaining your medications and possibly needing to take some extra medications, you'll just need to be very aware of your blood sugar levels throughout the day. And so that just means also being ready to have certain foods available in case you need to quickly raise or lower your blood sugar levels. That means having some healthy and safe carbohydrates nearby, and that could be some vegetable soup, even some applesauce, as long as it doesn't have added sugars. Now, another huge thing for everyone, but especially for diabetics, is to stay hydrated. I'm not saying to drown yourself in a gallon of water here. Just be mindful to drink some water throughout the day. And definitely no soda. If you're still drinking soda, now is the time to cut that out. And possibly even cutting back on your caffeine drinks, because some of those caffeine drinks can actually end up making you dehydrated as well, just like soda. So If you need to, you can try to find some low sugar natural fruit juice, but I'd probably recommend just water. It's not going to raise your blood sugar levels. It's going to keep you feeling full and, keep you from becoming dehydrated. So here is what nutritionists are saying you should stockpile right now. Number one, canned beans. Canned beans are not going to be as healthy as organic black beans, say, but beans in general are still going to offer you a lot of nutrition, a lot of antioxidants in there, a heap of fiber content in beans. So if you have to get those in canned form, at least you will have them stockpiled. And then you can use them in your meals whenever you need. Just make sure to drain and rinse those beans before cooking them so you can cut out on those processed sugars, those added sugars in the syrup in those cans. Now, speaking of cans, you can also get certain fish canned salmon. I haven't tried canned salmon myself. I can't attest to how that might taste. But we've discussed salmon a lot on this channel before because salmon especially, a lot of different fish, but salmon especially, it's an excellent centerpiece for a meal when you're worried about diabetes because it contains heart-healthy fats and there's good protein content. You could also do canned sardines or canned tuna. So canned oily fish, ones that are going to give you some of those needed omega-3 fatty acids would be worth considering purchasing. Some fish you may even get away with freezing, and then you'll have them for even longer. So just look to your salmon, your tuna, mackerel, sardines, wild caught if you can find that. You can also grab some extra lean, skinless, boneless cuts of chicken and freeze those. That'll give you some lean protein that you can cook with over this time period, especially if you freeze them. You could even find some ground turkey to freeze, and that's another lean protein alternative to red beef that is pretty good for you. Now, of course, a packaged long life protein food that would come in handy in a situation like this would be something like peanut butter, but again, you'll just want to check the specific variety of peanut butter when you find it at the store. Make sure it's not loaded with added sugars. Peanut butter can still skyrocket your blood sugar levels if you aren't careful. So you certainly don't want to be putting any peanut butter between two pieces of white bread. Now, other canned goods that could come in handy right now would be things like coconut milk, perhaps cashew milk. I've been using coconut milk a lot for my coffee. It's got lower fat content than regular milk, and most of these you can buy on the shelf, and they can be left out, not refrigerated for a while. You just need to refrigerate them and use them quickly after you open it. But you could stockpile a couple of cases of coconut milk and know that you'll have those for, you stick them under your cabinet and you'll have them for a while. Brown rice. Let's talk about rice a little bit. We all know by now white rice is a pretty carby, starchy product, but you can switch to brown rice in general. It's a good alternative, and brown rice you can have and cook up a variety of meals with it, and it's going to definitely be a lower glycemic option than white rice. So it's going to help you manage your blood sugar levels better than white rice or other white flour products. Speaking of pasta is usually a great long shelf life product to have in a situation like this. As long as you can boil water and you've got some pasta, you will never go hungry, right? But right now, I'm sure you know that most white flour pastas, they're going to wreak havoc on your blood sugar levels. So if you can, just try some different varieties of non-white flour-based pasta. Specifically, try out some vegetable-based noodles. I've been using these a lot lately, and they're excellent. Try squash noodles or carrot noodles. You can do these from home. You can just buy a bag of carrots, and if you have a spiralizer, you can spiralize them and make them into noodles. You can even just take a peeler, go the lo-fi route, peel carrots, and you can saute those. You can cut them up a little more if you want, saute them, and you still have a pasta dish. And to that end, we're talking about alternatives to grain products. Maybe now it's finally time for you to try out that quinoa. I know everyone's been talking about it, and maybe you've been pushing it aside and say, I'm never going to try that. But you know what? It's easy to cook. It's as easy to cook as rice, and it is a healthier grain product. It's not going to raise your blood sugar levels as much. So if you have the chance, yeah, maybe now is that time to finally try out that quinoa. Now, using quinoa, using brown rice, using vegetable noodles, you may be able to get away with a whole heap of varieties of stir fry recipes. If you can manage to stockpile your fridge with a lot of good quality, fiber rich vegetables, ones especially can be frozen, like cauliflower or broccoli. I'm not sure about mushrooms being frozen, but bell peppers can certainly be frozen. Same with spinach, even carrots. Now, think about all of the different varieties of stir fries you could create with just a few of these fiber rich vegetables and a couple of varieties of that kind of base that you might want, whether it be brown rice, quinoa, vegetable noodle. Then you can try out a bunch of different sauces for it that are going to be healthy and give you nutrition benefits. Say like a lemon or a lime juice or a garlic sauce. There are just a whole bunch of options you can cook up with just a few of these ingredients. Now, normally we tell you to steer clear of canned vegetables or fruits because they're going to be soaked in preservatives and high sugar syrups, right? But in a crisis like this, maybe it's okay to have some canned fruits or canned vegetables. Again, you're just going to want to, when it comes time to use those, drain them, rinse them really well before you cook them. Now, speaking of cooking, obviously having a good supply of cooking oil is going to be key. And if you've watched any of our other videos by now, you'll know that we definitely recommend extra virgin olive oil as your best cooking oil. Unless you're just going to lightly steam your vegetables with a little bit of water, extra virgin olive oil is going to be the healthiest cooking oil that you can find usually. You're just going to want to not cook on the highest of heats, and you're going to want to minimize the amount of oil that you use. So use that half a teaspoon measurement. Only use half a teaspoon of extra virgin olive oil for most of the veggies you might want to saute. But beyond just cooking oils and stir-fried veggies and stuff, what else can you make up here that's going to be okay for you? Well, you can do some soups. So grab some broths as well if you can. Grab a couple of things of vegetable broth, even chicken broth. And those can help you make some healthy soups, actually. And spices also. Spices are always going to be there to help you fight inflammation and other factors which could actually also add to your risk of contracting this disease. So spices can be important too. Go for your turmeric or your garlic, cinnamon, cumin, all great nutrient-rich spices that can help you fight the effects of certain diseases and are going to be great for your health no matter what. Okay, so one final product that we probably should talk about when it comes to stockpiling is cereal. A lot of nutritionists right now are saying to grab as much cereal as you can. Now, cereal can be a really good shelf item to grab in a pinch, but by now I am sure you know that most cereals, they are going to be pretty bad for you in terms of trying to maintain that healthy blood glucose control. So I think just be very mindful not to go overboard with the cereals. Same with the bread. They're staples of most people's diets, but it doesn't mean you should suddenly decide it's time to be eating white bread sandwiches for every meal. Now, vegetables. Again, we talked about this before, but just to reiterate, frozen vegetables are your friend here. So if you have space for them, stock up on those frozen green beans, frozen peas, frozen broccoli, even those mixed veggie bags that you find in the freezer section. Those can be really helpful right now. So, yeah, if you're going to be bulking up on anything, the frozen veggies, go for that. And frozen berries as well. They're going to be great for you, especially blueberries. They're excellent antioxidants contained within berries and blueberries. So you can do a lot of great stuff to get a little bit of sweetness into your diet, but still maintain healthy blood glucose control if you eat some berries. Okay, guys. Well, so those are sort of the general issues to consider when it comes to coronavirus and diabetes. The general recommendations when it comes to how to food prep for this thing, it's the same sort of advice we would give any type 1 or type 2 diabetic normally, and that is, I think it's just that you may have to think about how to work around needing those longer shelf life items. Those ones are typically pretty high glycemic. So in general, again, if you are a bit older, if you have type 2 diabetes, your risk for contracting the coronavirus is heightened. Just be aware of that. But it is how you deal with it from there which is going to count for your health and for other people's health as well. So don't overburden the hospital system by running to the ED at the first sign of sickness. Call your doctor. Have them help you understand what to do and when. If you do stockpile anything, forget about the paper towels and the toilet paper. Get healthy food items which can be frozen or which can stay in a can for a while. That's what's important. Also, again, check your blood sugar frequently, at least every 4 hours. Take a big break from your snacks and your sweet treats. Just put those guys on hold, put them in the back corner of your cupboard. Forget about added sugar for a while now. I know you can usually have a little bit of doses of sweet treats here and there and not worry too much about wrecking your blood sugar. But for now, best to just stay away from added sugar products. And of course, again, this goes for everybody. Wash your hands, especially if you are going out on the town. And to that end, of course, do your best to avoid touching your face. And so, yeah, most of the general recommendations, they're going to be the same for everyone, whether or not you have diabetes. But for now, I think this is going to cover most everything I can think of to cover when it comes to understanding the coronavirus and how it intersects with diabetes. This virus, guys, it's going to come and go. And at the end of the day, most of the world is going to be okay. But there will still be a large number of deaths from the sound of things. And there is a risk that there will be a large number of type 1 or type 2 or even pre-diabetics who will be particularly susceptible to this virus. So, be safe out there, be cautious, but don't panic. Those are my best words of advice right now. Thanks for listening, guys. I hope this has brought you just a little bit of clarification on this issue. Otherwise, I hope you're having a happy and healthy day as best you can. Bye for now.